Well, team, we're again together to talk about SlopeScout and do another quick 15 update on what we're working on and how it's working. Usage has been really good. Keeps continuing to go every week, which is awesome to see. We thought we'd do a little primer for watchers to discuss how it's working, how to use the tool, what the output means, and how to effectively take that, transfer it into not only DIC policies, but also insurance to value and other things. And so welcome today. And who wants to jump in to talk about SlopeScout?
There are a lot of different pieces of information on the report output, and maybe we should start by covering the different components. What do you think?
Sure, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Should we start by the large graphical output, which shows the slope over the measured piece? Who'd like to take that one?
The map that you see in the largest kind of area of the map that shows your building and your profile lines that are run, the map behind there is a pre-calculated slope that we've done and just kind of show you a representation of the change in elevation. That is different than the data that is used to create the charts on the right-hand side. That is strict just elevation, how far you are above sea level. But it is interesting to kind of see the two of those in contrast because you care about, both your elevation, but you also, primarily here are focusing on how quickly that elevation is changing over distance. And that's what we're trying to show in just a very simple image on that left-hand side of the report. So often you will notice very sharp drop-offs over a very short period of distance. And often that can show retaining walls or anything that's been placed on the property that's not necessarily a natural feature. But because it was there in place when the elevation models were taken, those will show up and can be very interesting. I'll let you guys speak to the importance of that in insurance. But if the retaining walls were there when the elevation models were shot, those will absolutely show up on those slope maps.
Yeah, I love the look of the colors within the map to kind of really highlight slope severity. But that line drawing, especially with the darker color to represent where the building footprint sits, is really to me very valuable for someone to understand that the house or building may be on a flat parcel, or at least the foundation is flat, or may not be, but away from it is where you focus in on whether that you have some severe slope issues for reconstruction or liability or other hazards. And so, or natural catastrophe, obviously, as well, landslide and earthquake. So, yeah, I love the output on that specific report you can download once you've run your 1 year slope analysis.
We kind of used a mix of both different forms that we've seen, when somebody's applying for a new policy, different levels that we saw on those, as well as your years of knowledge and expertise in rebuilding, all of that kind of thing, to create the different colors and how we broke up that legend to show that on the map.
So as underwriters, as former underwriters, I should say, when you see the presence of a retaining wall, how do you approach that from a coverage issue? Are you prone to rate differently for that kind of exposure? Maybe you guys could talk a little bit about that from an underwriting standpoint.
By its nature, a retaining wall is retaining something, and that's often a hillside. And when you're dealing with DIC or earthquake coverage, a retained hillside is something that's a pretty big concern when the ground starts shaking because it often unretains pretty quickly, and there's often a house below the retaining wall, and quite a bit of damage can occur. And so, knowing that the retaining wall is there and understanding the general lay of the land would be pretty important to an underwriter.
So as of now, we're looking at a lot of reports that they actually don't show the presence of a retaining wall, when in fact there is one. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, if looking at a Google Earth image or something, probably wouldn't show a retaining wall. And I don't even know an underwriting question that would ask. I think there is, though. I think some applications might ask retaining walls, etc. It's an excluded coverage, I believe. Chris may tell me I'm wrong. But I believe
Usually
retaining walls are
include-
excluded. Yeah.
In section
I'm-
2, property not covered.
Thank you.
Yep.
So,
There it is.
so if you consider that, right, a lot of underwriters might just go, well, that's not covered, so I don't have to worry about what that entails, especially if they're not writing earthquake or landslide. But the reality of it is, if there's an earthquake or landslide, you're probably going to have to open a claim to some degree anyway. And so understanding what you have around you is important, regardless of whether you write at natural catastrophe coverage within the policy itself. One thing that this has proven to be, I think, at least interesting for the people who've been using this for a bit, is how do they apply that information they find from SlopeScout into a cost guide, right? An agent contacted me recently and had run a report, but was confused as to how she might use the percentages of slope into her cost guide. And within a cost guide, usually you can pick your percentages of slope, or you can pick a range of slopes. And so we went through hers. She wrote a series of condos up on Queen Anne Hill, which is a bit slopey. And she had a couple sides of those buildings, as well as the buildings themselves, were on at least a 20+% slope. And so she called to say, how would I apply this? And we spent probably 30 minutes going through the cost guide with each other, talking about percentages, talking about averages over all four sides of the building and what it might average out to. And it ended up increasing the value of the building reconstruction wise, something like 70%, which is probably fair. And when you think of like the location too, one thing as an underwriter or as a company to think about Queen Anne Hill, and it's on a major road in Queen Anne Hill, you got to shut down the road to construct that building again. And that's going to have a cost to it. And so is the reconstruction cost part of your worry? Yes. But are there additional reconstruction costs involved that might also be important to understand based on what you can find from SlopeScout and understanding the place you are? I believe that's true as well. So there's applications all over how this product can help determine the right value to insure, so no one's disappointed when a claim happens.
Queen Anne Hill, for those not from the Northwest, is the ubiquitous background for most of the Space Needle shots you see on television. It's the hill you see in the background.
Yep.
But that kind of thing is an awfully big miss if you're from a broker or agent standpoint, if you don't know about those kinds of contours in the land, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And I'm not sure how many people underwrite slope any longer if they're not writing earthquakes. And so the question becomes, how do you incorporate that mentality into the product? And that's kind of one of the reasons we built SlopeScout, is to not only help people with earthquake and DIC policies and those kind of things, but your average underwriting group to really make sure that insurance to value is right. Because if it's not, you're going to hear about it. It's absolutely going to become an issue, whether it's a fire or anything else. Reconstruction still has to happen on that hillside.
So that has implications for building ordinance coverage, increased cost of
Absolutely.
construction.
Absolutely.
Actually, even cleanup, right? Isn't there someone typically that would apply, right? So that needs
Yep.
to be accommodated. Yeah. So there's more than just a graph, though, isn't there, on that report? Speaking of DIC coverage, we put a modified Mercalli index on there, right? And
Yeah, we do modified Mercalli and Lahar, tsunami. We even throw a little bit of flood zone information in there as well, liquefaction and other things. We didn't target earthquake specifically, but Scott, who was on with us, really is the genesis of this product after talking to an agency and them wondering how they really could accurately calculate slope. And so that idea is kind of why we've built that extended information at the bottom of the SlopeScout. But those of us who've been in the business 35 years or so used to underwrite slope because earthquake was included within our policies. And so it's just a natural way for an older subset of underwriters to think, I got to include that because I got to get the number right.
well, so with one report, you're doing what might take hours of research, right? I think that's one of the
Yes.
key pieces of value that Scott's idea led to.
Yeah, the secondary effect, as we are all looking at Google Photos, photos are by their nature two-dimensional. You look at something like the first slide that we bring up here, and you just see a house that more or less borders a park with a series of other houses. And with the second photo, you see the map doesn't tell you much different than that. It just kind of looks like you're looking at a house with a big common backyard park area. If you were to run SlopeScout, you bring up the initial map with the topographical information, and it would cue you to something's a little not flat park out behind the house. And after running the report, you would see that, yes, indeed, the house does have a very precipitous fall off in the backyard. It looks like it drops about, right off the back deck, it drops about 60 feet over about 100 feet worth of distance right down into a canyon. So all of a sudden, this house on a nice park becomes a house on a hillside that drops down into a noticeable canyon. And those two things are substantially different exposures.
And we've gone away from, inspecting certainly personal lines, but even many commercial lines accounts are no longer inspected. And so you're underwriting fast, or the machines are underwriting fast for you, and it takes a look at the street view and goes, cool, looks good to me, let's go. There's a lot that could be missed. And the product has been built to be quick, efficient, give you the answers. And then, as we've already talked about a little bit, if you have questions about how to implement those answers, the best thing to do is pick up the phone and talk to one of us. We were happy to spend time with you to talk about this product and how to use it effectively in the insurance space. But heck, we'd probably come up with ideas in every space that you can imagine where slope's an issue.
I can see
What
an
else
issue
do we need to
with pre-permitting on this with this tool as well. Maybe not just for reconstruction costs, but when people are beginning to look at altering their structure in any way, I think insurance companies want to know that you have to get special permitting to build on this slope, and what the implications would be to comply with that permitting and zone restriction, with those zone restrictions after a loss.
Yeah, I would think so as well. I mean, retrofitting a 25% slope for earthquake wouldn't be cheap.
Maybe not required 50 years ago, but on Queen Anne
No.
these days, it's likely to be, right?
Yeah, I don't know how much new construction's up there on any of the hills around Seattle or anywhere out here in the Northwest, but the likelihood is, whether they're retrofitted or not, whether that's been built into the cost estimation of reconstruction or not, is a good question to ask as an underwriter. But new construction, as you indicated, whether it's new or somebody buys a beautiful lot, tears down the old house and puts a new one up. These are all considerations either the engineer's certainly going to have to take a look at, but the insurance companies could be right in the mix to make sure what they needed done is actually effectively done.
I recall Scott bringing up a very good point regarding flood coverage, knowing that the structure is at the top of a crest of a small valley or gully or something like that, as opposed to maybe 50, 60, 100 feet below. That kind of positioning can be awfully important. Scott, do you have an example that you ever come across where that was the case?
Well, there's the SlopeScout output report has 3 core pieces of information that all work in unison with each other. We talked about the graphical element. It's color coded and gives you a very quick lay of the land and general slope around the property. And then to the right of that is the actual elevation analysis, which I see. It tells you, I use this a lot in flood underwriting. You can extend the line, the access out to the body of water, and see how far that building sits over what distance and how far the water would have to rise. If there's any crest or trough in between your property and that body of water, what would it actually take for that flood water to enter the property? And then to tie all of those things together is the earthquake information and flood zone that we provide down at the bottom that works with those 2 graphics that we're showing you above. The graphical, the slope goes with the earthquake. And then I see, the flood zone working with that more elevation analysis. We've done several tests on this. Someone mentioned retaining walls. That was, I would say, a bonus feature that we discovered while testing this, I ran this on my own home, as anyone would do, and I noticed red lines that picked up my retaining walls both in front and back in the house. And that's just because of how detailed our elevation analysis is, and how small of interval that we're doing these calculations that allow you to pick up those drastic changes over such a small distance. And then lastly, as just a test case, I had someone provide me with an address that I knew nothing about the property. And we were looking at satellite imagery. And so when I pulled up the address, all I could see was trees. That's all it looked like. I ran a slope analysis, got the graphical image, looked at the elevation, and I said, I'm guessing here, but this, where it's flat, this is a river, and there's a 3-foot bank on the river, and then it rises but only 1 foot to the next 50 feet to where your insured structure is. And I probably wouldn't give flood coverage on this based on what I'm seeing. And the person that gave me the address says, you nailed that property exactly. So I was able to pick up what was going on there, only looking at the elevation analysis and that graphical image, because all I could see with my eyes was the trees.
What a great example. Yeah,
Fantastic use case.
yeah, it really is.
The beauty of this product is even if there's overhanging trees, if there's a building footprint that you can tag onto within SlopeScout, it will still do a slope. And so if you're looking down, you can't figure out what you're seeing, you can use this product to then generate the same sort of information we've already talked about and you've already seen within the video, and get an actual accurate representation of that building, where it sits, the slope around it. And really, I think that's one of the most useful things about it, given a lot of the places where we have slope in the Northwest, we like trees. We like to surround our houses with trees, and sometimes it's really difficult to get a representation of that house by just trying to look at it from either aerial or even sometimes from a street view. And so that's one thing we wanted to make sure we mentioned as well to help people use this tool.
Look at
And one thing that I would say is, this is still a new tool. It's still a work in progress in some ways. If you search for an address, and you do not see a building footprint where there should be one because of tree cover or something like that, a lot of our building footprints are created using AI or other things. And if I don't have leaf off on imagery when we're running that tool, we may miss a building. We added a form that you can submit a request, and you can include your address or latitude, longitude coordinates, and we can add that building footprint very quickly so you could run your analysis. We are always looking at those and able to update that really quickly as long as you let us know. We do also go through a process every month where we are searching for new buildings and adding those all the time, but there's so many buildings, we're bound to miss something. So if we have your help with that, that would be really, really great. And the other thing is, if you're just noticing something not quite looking right on your report or anything like that, we are always happy to make those changes if we know about them. An address needs to be changed, anything like that. We are open to all suggestions and feedback for any errors or any requests that you have to make SlopeScout better for you and more usable. We want this to be the absolute best product it can be for you.
Last thing we should probably cover are some useful tips for the users of our product. Scott, I know you've got one at least, if not more, and Carrie as well. And so take it away.
Yeah, well, the 300 feet access that we provide is made, for your convenience, and is probably good enough to catch most of the properties. You'll look at these things, you'll see that it's relatively flat, and then you can move on. But if you do notice a significant slope, you make sure you either adjust the access to correspond to that, and then run it out to make sure you're catching that entire slope so that calculation is the most accurate can be. And then especially if you're using this to underwrite for flood, make sure you run it out to that body of water so you can track that elevation analysis from the water to the structure itself.
And that was really our intention and why we used the topographic hillshade map as our background. It just helps the elevation to pop up a little bit more easily on the map. And you can also, if you run the report and see that there is a very steep slope that isn't hit by your profiles and included in those charts, you can always run it again and just rotate so that you are hitting the area of concern with that elevation or slope with one of your profiles. So that's included in both the chart and the map on the left-hand side.
Look at
Well, all in all, yeah, I think it's a great product. Hope this video has been helpful to help you understand a little bit about what SlopeScout can do for you and the uses for it. Again, we're always happy to jump on a call with you or have more of these. If you have a desire to have us do more and more videos about specific things that you run into, please let us know. We're happy to spend time as a group talking about this product because we believe it's valuable and we're kind of excited about pitching it to you. So thank you for spending time with us today.